All right, we've done water-soluble and fat-soluble vitamins in Part A and Part B of the lecture. In Part C, I want to finish looking at minerals. So, collectively, minerals represent chemical elements, metals, and minerals, and we obtain them through the foods that we eat in very small amounts. And they're generally divided into what are called macro minerals and trace elements, as you can see on the screen, which is, not surprisingly, based on based upon the amounts that we require for good health each day. Now, their minerals are necessary for forming body structures like our bones, and they help regulate chemical reactions, acting as cofactors for a lot of enzyme reactions, such as antioxidants and supports our immune function. They also regulate a whole bunch of bodily processes like nervous function, heart and blood clotting, and fluid regulation and energy metabolism. So minerals don't provide energy by themselves, but they're involved in a whole bunch of processes associated with energy metabolism. So currently there's 7 macro minerals and 9 trace elements, and you only see 7 macro minerals on your screen at the moment. 7 macro and 9 trace elements that are essential for human nutrition. The macro minerals are required in varying amounts, and as you can see on the screen, they're involved in a whole number of essential human processes. So sulfur is the only macro mineral without an actual recommended intake. What we're going to do is, again, like we did with the vitamins, you're not going to need to know all these, but calcium and magnesium, as you see there with an asterisk, we're going to look at in a little bit more detail, along with, so there are 2 macro minerals we're going to look at, and there's 2 trace elements we're going to look at. So the trace elements, as you can see from the list, they're also involved in a whole range of human functions, and they're required in quite small amounts, hence the name, trace elements. And we're talking about sort of micrograms or milligrams. So to give you an example, we require approximately 150 micrograms of iodine a day, but without this trace element, severe thyroid gland issues can occur. So even though they're small amounts are required, we still need them because numerous health problems would occur. So as you can see again with the asterisk, iron and zinc are the 2 trace elements that we're going to look at in a little bit more detail. Now, I assume every one of you has heard of calcium, and it's obviously linked to bone health, and you would know that, and you should know that intuitively. We're all told to obviously drink our milk for strong, healthy bones, but what many of you may not be aware of are the other vital roles that calcium plays within human physiology. Calcium is the most abundant mineral in our bodies. We've got these big storage warehouses in our bodies called bones, and our bones release it whenever we require, whenever our blood levels of calcium need to be topped up. So, as I mentioned earlier in relation to vitamin D, calcium is maintained within strict physiological limits, and when we consume calcium in our foods, the excess is taken up by our bones to be stored in later use. And as you can see from a list from the functions, calcium acts as an enzyme cofactor and is required for muscle contractions. If you know, you will come to learn sliding filament theory, unless you already know it, with skeletal muscle. But without calcium present, you're essentially not going to be able to engage in muscle contraction. So the animation that's playing is showing calcium ions binding to what we call troponin, so that actin and myosin fibrils within the muscle fibre can actually interact and they slide past each other. Now, I've mentioned before, and sorry for mentioning again, but you would have to be on a fairly extreme diet to become calcium deficient, but it does happen because the body has a storage bank of calcium in our bones. any sort of blood calcium deficiency usually as a result of a combination of parathyroid function and vitamin D levels. So you usually have something else physiologically going on to tend to explain any sort of calcium deficiency. But stands to reason, consistently low levels of dietary calcium will result in reduced bone density as the body leaches calcium from the bones whenever dietary intake is inadequate. And as you already know intuitively, the best sources of calcium are dairy products and small fish like sardines or anchovies, etc. Alright, magnesium is involved in so many of our physiological processes. In fact, it's required in over 300 different reactions in our body. So magnesium actually plays a much larger role in our diets than we realise. It's required for cells for DNA synthesis and works with calcium, which we've just touched on, for bone health. And it's required for normal excitability of our muscles and nerves, so for our muscles to contract and our nerves to fire. So we need magnesium for reactions involved in carbohydrate and fat metabolism in order to create ATP. And it helps keep our heart rate steady. It assists with blood clotting. It supports our immune system. It helps regulate our blood glucose levels and plays a role in maintaining adequate blood pressure as well. So you can see it has a vast range of functions, which is quite surprising given the fact that it's a mineral that we don't need to consume a lot of. Now, deficiency in magnesium is pretty rare, but its absorption can be decreased with high amounts of protein, fibre and zinc, which may cause marginal deficiency. And in an experiment to induce magnesium deficiency, researchers found it would cause low calcium and potassium levels, retention of sodium, and create a variety of neurological muscle symptoms and affect our digestive function as well. And there's a whole range of sources for magnesium, as you can see: dark green vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, fruits and fish. So again, eating from a wide variety of foods, you should be able to consume sufficient magnesium in your diet. Now, if we move on to one of the trace elements, the importance of iron in our diets is so great that I could spend an entire lecture just talking about iron, but I'll try to summarise the most important information here. Without adequate iron, our ability to transport oxygen and produce red blood cells is affected, and this can obviously compromise athletic performance as well as our general health and well-being. So for those of you who don't know, iron forms part of heme, which is the oxygen-carrying component of both hemoglobin and myoglobin. Hemoglobin carries oxygen from the lungs to the rest of the body, while myoglobin is involved in transporting and short-term storage of oxygen in the muscle tissue, myo being muscle. Iron-dependent enzymes are required for DNA synthesis, meaning iron is required for growth, reproduction, healing and immune function. And iron's also required as an antioxidant because it's involved in the conversion of what we call reactive oxygen species to water and oxygen. You don't have to get too concerned with that, but as long as you are aware that the trace element of iron plays a larger role than we realise. Iron interacts with a whole number of other micronutrients, and it's found often closely tied to vitamin A, with deficiencies in vitamin A making anemia worse. Vitamin C can assist with the absorption of iron from non-animal products, and adequate levels of copper are required for iron metabolism and red blood cell formation. Calcium consumption at the same time as iron consumption can reduce absorption. So it's a little bit of a delicate balance sometimes. Now, iron deficiency is usually described in 3 levels, as you can see on the screen. Storage depletion, where no functional symptoms occur, and functional deficiency, where red blood cell formation is impaired, and then anemia. So storage depletion, early functional iron deficiency and anemia. and we know where anemia is. It's where there's inadequate iron to produce normal red blood cells. Most symptoms of iron deficiency are a result of anemia, and it will impair athletic performance and physical work capacity by firstly reducing oxygen delivery to active tissue, and then reducing the amount of oxygen that can be used for ATP synthesis. And there's two different dietary forms of iron. So there's heme and non-heme. Don't get confused with them. Heme iron comes from the hemoglobin and myoglobin found in animal products that we consume. So heme's got to do with animals. Heme iron is more readily absorbed and accounts for about a third of absorbed dietary iron, even though it's approximately only 10 to 15% of iron consumption. So heme iron absorption is less influenced by other nutrient interactions, and it also enhances the absorption of non-heme iron. Non-heme iron is obtained from plant-based foods as well as dairy products, and its absorption is strongly influenced by different enhancers and inhibitors present in the same meal. Go back. Severe deficiencies have been found in people who have diets high in phytates, which are found predominantly in legumes or genetic disorders that inhibit zinc absorption. So zinc deficiency was discovered in the Middle East in about the 1960s, when it was discovered to be the cause of adolescent dwarfism. And it also causes delayed sexual maturity, skin rashes, immunity problems, and what they generally call mental health impairment or mental slowness. Of the fact that there's a whole range of interactions here. Iron supplements may inhibit zinc absorption, and calcium may also do the same thing, particularly in combination with phytates. And zinc may enhance the bioavailability of folic acid. And as I've got there, sources of zinc include animal products and nuts. Bioavailability is higher in animal products, as a couple of the amino acids are known to assist with zinc absorption. Alright, don't panic with what you see on the screen. It's not like you need to understand or even remember what's on the screen, but I'm essentially showing you this diagram because I'm trying to illustrate the different energy production pathways for proteins, carbohydrates and fats, and the numerous roles that vitamins and minerals play in the big picture. So if you're sitting there going, well, why do I have to learn vitamins and minerals? Well, without vitamins and minerals, there is a whole cascade of chemical reactions in the body that would not occur, and then they would have a direct physiological impact if you're deficient in those vitamins or minerals. Now, the following two slides are essentially a summary of all the vitamins and minerals which relate to athletic training and performance. So when you look at them, it becomes pretty apparent that our bodies will not perform optimally without adequate intakes of vitamins and minerals. So they're essentially what helps keep us functioning. So involved in any activities that require, for example, muscle contraction, you need sufficient levels of sodium, potassium, calcium and magnesium as a simple example. Alright, marginal deficiency is becoming more prevalent in Western societies as we consume more and more pre-packaged and highly refined foods. So further constant unhealthy dieting, which limits kilojoule intake, also limits the availability of micronutrients. So it stands to reason that marginal deficiency is essentially as a result of, or what results from, engaging in some sort of dietary practice that limits our intake of vitamins and minerals. And marginal deficiencies don't show full manifestations of true vitamin deficiency, but as you can see from the table, there's various stages which do begin to impact on health and metabolic function. Right, hopefully that is a very quick overview of vitamins and minerals, and you've got an appreciation of the fact that they are essential. Even though we don't consume them in large amounts, they are certainly essential to a normal diet.